You're listening to Sunday with Stephen Rainey here on BBC Radio Ulster and BBC Radio Foyle. Coming up after 12, I'm going to be hearing about the long-running festival that aims to give you the experience of living on Craggy Island. But now, picture the scene. A woman goes missing, her husband has no clues as to her whereabouts, and a campaign to find her draws in a local woman who ends up being snared in a web of intrigue that she might not be able to escape from. If that sounds like the perfect recipe for a page-turner, then good news. Belfast author Rose McClellan's new book, Under Your Skin, is exactly that. The kind of book that you pick up and you don't put down till it's done.
It starts off with a guy called Kyle phoning 999 and reporting that his wife has gone missing. And by the second chapter, we know that his wife Hannah is trapped in a basement somewhere, and we don't know who has put her there or why. And so the book is the sort of slow unravelling as to the mystery behind her disappearance.
It's a very dark tale and it handles some very difficult situations. How did you approach telling this story?
Well, I wanted first and foremost for it to be a page turner and for there to be lots of twists and turns, for the reader to have that kind of what's happening next, just one more chapter, what's happening next, and for the story to move along. In the telling of the story, yes, there are some heavy themes and heavy issues in it. There were scenes that I found difficult to write. But when you're writing a scene, you kind of pretend you're in a theatre watching it on stage. You kind of pretend that you're watching it unfold. So yes, it can get upsetting because you feel so engrossed in it. But I sort of set myself timelines when I'm writing. I sort of set a timer and I say that I'm going to focus on the writing for that length of time and close off any other distractions. So I kind of just immerse myself in it, and then when it's done, I put it away and do something nice and relaxing for the rest of the day.
I love that idea, though, of almost having a mental bath afterwards to get rid of all the stuff that you don't like.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's the only way that I can make myself write, because it's almost like coaxing a child and saying, okay, if you do a chapter now, then you can do something nice for the rest of the day. And then it means that you can kind of enjoy the rest of the day guilt-free because you know that you've done your bit of work for the day.
The story is told from the perspective of these different characters. We get a chapter from their viewpoint. Does it give that intensity, I suppose, when you're bringing us into the mind of this character and seeing things from their perspective?
That's the intention, that it does feel intense. A lot of people have been saying that they've read this book in a day. They've just kind of gone through it really quickly, which I find is a wonderful compliment. Even though it take you months to write something and somebody can do it in a day. It's a lovely compliment if someone says, oh, I just kept turning the page. And I think maybe that's because the writing is so intense that you kind of feel a bit sort of sucked in.
The story is set in Belfast. Now, beyond the fact that you're from Northern Ireland, why did you set it there?
My first 3 books were set in London and Brighton because I lived there for 10 years. They always say you should write about what you know. And I really, really wanted to write a book that was set in Belfast where I could pull out street names and places that I know really well. And I also wanted to write a book about Belfast that was nothing to do with the Troubles or any of the history, a completely fresh new book with Belfast as the background. Why not?
Because this book doesn't know anything to the Troubles. I mean, it's very clearly set in Belfast, but I suppose it's a story that could happen anywhere.
Yes, that's the whole point. It could happen in Brighton or Birmingham or Bristol. It's a universal theme that's running through it that is kind of relevant to lots of relationships.
Your previous books were in a very different style. They were more kind of, it's the genre we know as chick lit. How did you feel making the transition into this type of writing, a more dark psychological thriller?
I've loved it. It's funny because the first 2 books, chick lit, they were sort of very lighthearted. It was always kind of about sort of strong female characters. But by the 3rd book, a friend said to me afterwards, you could have easily have changed that into a psychological thriller because that guy was really dangerous, and if you'd have made a few tweaks, that could have gone in a totally different direction. And I thought about that, and I also, my tastes were changing. The books that I was reading, the TV programs that I was watching were changing, and I just thought I'm going to give this a try actually. And there's clearly a very sort of dark side in my mind because I really enjoy getting stuck into it. Really enjoyed writing sort of something that more gritty and darker. I just found it fascinating.
Well, the way I said chick lit, it was almost in inverted commas, and I know there's a lot of people who are very sniffy about that. It's an incredibly popular genre, and a lot of people read it, but is there a sniffiness about it?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I did come up against that a lot. Sometimes I found it easier to say that my first books were, romantic comedy. It's a shame because, as you say, it's a genre that loads of people enjoy. It's hugely popular. I really don't know what to say about that because if it's so popular and so many people are enjoying it, then why not?
Rose McClelland, and her new book, Under Your Skin, is out now, published by Darkstroke. My panellists are still with me, Andre Murphy and Johnny McCambridge. I mean, I'm going to get on my soapbox for one moment, if you'll pardon me. And when it comes to reading, I just say, if you enjoy reading something, just read it. You don't have to worry about what other people think of it. Andre, I mean, are you a big reader yourself? Am I wrong here? Should people just read whatever they want?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the snobbery around literature is one of the things that puts so many people off, and then it ends up, and we wonder why literacy rates, and we want to worry about, whether people have the capacity to be able to interrogate issues. And and then we do this snobby thing alongside it. If it rings your bells, go and read it, and it's you in your own world with a book, and there is nothing like it. And as you said earlier on, it's feeling a bit autumny now, and the you can definitely feel the nights are getting a little bit longer, and there's no better way to spend an evening than in your home, snuggled up, and even to get away from the remote working and go into the world of a new book that you really like, and it's just one of the great joys of life that we can lose with smartphones and with social media, and it's great to rediscover that. And if it's whatever they call it, chick lit, whether it's a crime novel, whether it is something a bit heavier, just go and do it and enjoy it.
Because don't get me wrong, I have spent some time with some serious literary titans, ploughing my way through the greats. But at the same time, I have perhaps Belfast's biggest collection of Star Trek novels, and I am not ashamed of that. Johnny, what about yourself? I mean, have you been reading much lately? I mean, a lot of we hear from time to time people saying they've had more time on their hands working from home and whatnot. Have you been reading a lot during the pandemic?
Not as much as I should, and the answer is quite unusual. The reason I haven't been reading is because I've been writing, which is the space where the space where reading would usually take up. I've been writing. I'm actually working. I'm writing a novel myself at the minute, and I've so much empathy with what Rose said there. The fun part, Stephen, is that the bit at the start where you come up with the idea, and then you lie awake in bed at night, and your mind is going over all the different directions you can take it in, and you're fleshing out the characters, and then you sit down to write it. Oh my God, it is hard. It is hard work. And if you're trying to do this on as well as working full time and looking after a young child, you really, you have to be so disciplined and regimented. You have to set yourself a target of how many words you're going to do a week. And it's that period late at night where I would usually be reading. That's my writing time now. And I've more than one occasion I found I've woken up with my heads and my laptop and dribble on the keyboard where I've actually fallen asleep writing. So it has taken up that space. But the other point she made, which was so true, was this idea of and I've done this before with books, where you spend maybe 2 years writing a book, and then you send it to someone to have a look, and they come back, within a day or a couple of hours, and say, yes, I've read that. You say, no, this is my life's work. You should take time, savor it, please.
Read it again, give me the joy of that. And I have to say, as someone who's tackled writing myself, that I would find new ways of procrastinating every time I sit down in front of the keyboard. And the last time I tried it, I found myself spending more and more time finding the appropriate mood music to write, and then I would realise I've left myself like 5 minutes to try and do a bit of writing.
Yes, you're trying to find excuses or ways out. It is very, very difficult. And while there's a lovely joy in the creative process, it has to be married up with the inspiration has to be married with the perspiration of actually doing it. And particularly if you have a deadline or a certain number of words that you have to write by a day, it can become quite turgid. And then once you do that, as Rose said, you have that period away from it. Where you say, right, I've done it, and if you can get it done early, and you still get some time to enjoy the day, knowing that you've done your bit of writing for that day, and you can go and relax and spend some time with the family. It's a lovely feeling.
I actually did finish a book with my Radio 1 colleague Philip Taggart, and when we reached the last page, it was very much a case of, right, let's never speak to each other ever again, let's put this in the past. You're listening to Sunday with Stephen Rainey, here with you until 1 o'clock on BBC Radio Ulster and BBC Radio Foyle. Now, away from books, if you were to ask me what my favourite television programme of all